The coffee was scalding hot, and I was running exactly 12 minutes late for my lunch break when it happened. One moment I was juggling my tote bag, phone, and an overfilled cup from the cafe across from Seattle Public Library's main branch, and the next, my entire vanilla latte was cascading down the front of what had to be a $5,000 suit. "Oh my God," I gasped, watching the light brown liquid seep into the crisp white shirt beneath the tailored jacket. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you." The man didn't move. He stood there on the busy sidewalk, pedestrians flowing around us like water around a stone, and simply looked down at his ruined clothes. Then his eyes lifted to meet mine. I'd lived in Seattle for 28 years, worked in the library system for 6, and had seen every kind of person this city had to offer. But I had never seen anyone quite like him. Dark hair perfectly styled, sharp jawline that could cut glass, and eyes so intensely brown they were almost black. He was tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out that expensive suit in a way that suggested the gym was a regular part of his routine. He was also, I realized with a sinking feeling, absolutely gorgeous. "Are you finished staring, or should I give you a moment?" His voice was smooth, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe? Heat flooded my cheeks. I wasn't staring. I was assessing the damage. I fumbled in my bag for napkins, coming up with a crumpled handful that would be utterly useless against that much liquid. "Here, let me—" "Don't." The single word stopped me mid-reach. "You've done enough." My embarrassment instantly transformed into irritation. Yes, I'd ruined his shirt, but accidents happened. "Excuse me?" I apologized. I offered to help. "What exactly do you want me to do? Pay for your dry cleaning?" One dark eyebrow arched. That would be a start. "Fine." I dug into my bag again, pulling out my wallet. "How much? 20? 50? I thrust a handful of bills at him, not even counting. "Will that cover it? Or do you need me to take out a loan for your precious designer suit?" For a moment, he just stared at the money in my hand. Then, incredibly, his lips twitched. "You're very bold for someone who just assaulted me with coffee." Assaulted? It was an accident. And if you hadn't been standing in the middle of the sidewalk like you own the place... I stopped, taking a breath. This was ridiculous. I was arguing with a stranger over spilled coffee when I should be eating lunch before my break ended. "You know what? Keep the money, don't keep the money, I don't care. I'm late." I shoved the bills into his hand and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "What's your name?" I glanced back, surprised. "Why?" "So I know who to send the dry cleaning bill to." Despite everything, I almost smiled. Diana Carter. And you can send that bill straight to..." I caught myself before finishing that sentence. "The Seattle Public Library, main branch. I'm sure you can figure it out." Then I walked away, feeling his eyes on my back the entire time. I didn't think I'd ever see him again. I was spectacularly wrong. 2 days later, he walked into the library. I was at the reference desk, helping an elderly gentleman find books on World War II aviation, when I felt that prickling sensation of being watched. I looked up, and there he was, standing by the new arrivals display, those dark eyes fixed directly on me. He wore different clothes this time, dark jeans, a black shirt with the top 2 buttons undone, a leather jacket that probably cost more than my car. He looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, completely out of place among the book stacks and study tables. "Diana," my coworker Marissa whispered, suddenly at my elbow. "Who is that incredibly hot man staring at you?" "No one," I muttered, returning my attention to Mr. Peterson's book request. "Just someone I accidentally coffee-bombed the other day." "You coffee-bombed that?" "Girl, you need to be more careful. Men like that don't just walk into libraries every day." She wasn't wrong, and he wasn't leaving. After I finished helping Mr. Peterson, I watched as coffee guy, I refused to think of him as hot stranger, actually checked out a book on Italian Renaissance art, which seemed oddly specific. He came back the next day, and the day after that. By the end of the week, I was convinced he was either stalking me or had suddenly developed an insatiable passion for library research. He checked out books on everything from architecture to winemaking to, bizarrely, medieval warfare. He never approached me directly, but he was always there, a dark, expensive presence in my peripheral vision. On Friday, I finally confronted him. I waited until he was browsing the history section, then marched over with my best librarian authority face. "Okay, what's your deal?" He pulled out a book on Roman military tactics, examining it like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. "I'm sorry?" "Your deal. Why are you here every day? Are you following me? Because if this is about the coffee, I already offered to pay. I like to read." He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that I almost believed him. "Right. And you just happened to discover a love of reading the day after I spilled coffee on you?" He finally looked at me, and I hated how my heart skipped at the full force of his attention. "Maybe you inspired me." "Inspired you to what, exactly?" "To spend more time in libraries." He slid the book back onto the shelf. "They're peaceful, quiet, full of interesting things." His gaze traveled over my face. "And interesting people." I crossed my arms, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach. That's a line if I've ever heard one. "Is it working?" "No." "Liar." The word was soft, almost teasing, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks again. This man had an infuriating ability to get under my skin. "What do you want?" I asked, dropping the confrontational tone. I was suddenly tired of this game we were playing. He was quiet for a moment, studying me with those intense dark eyes. "Have dinner with me." "What?" "Dinner, tomorrow night. There's an Italian place in Pioneer Square that makes the best carbonara outside of Rome." I should have said no. Every instinct I had was screaming that this man was trouble. Not just because of the expensive clothes and the mysterious daily library visits, but because of the way he made me feel. Off balance. Breathless. Like I was standing on the edge of something I didn't understand. But I'd been playing it safe my entire life. Safe job, safe apartment, safe routine. Where had that gotten me? 28 years old, single, and spending Friday nights reorganizing my bookshelves. "I'm not dressed for fancy Italian restaurants," I said, which wasn't exactly a no. "Tomorrow," he repeated. "I'll pick you up at 7. I didn't agree to anything, and I definitely didn't give you my address." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from intimidating to devastating. "You work until 6 on Saturdays. I'll be waiting outside." Then he walked away, leaving me standing in the history section, wondering what I'd just gotten myself into. Marissa appeared at my shoulder immediately. "Please tell me you said yes to whatever he just asked." "I think I did. I'm not sure. It happened so fast." "Diana Carter, you are going on a date with the most gorgeous man who has ever set foot in this library, and I will personally help you pick out an outfit. No arguments." I wanted to argue. I wanted to point out that I didn't know this man's last name, didn't know anything about him except that he looked like sin in designer clothes and apparently had enough free time to haunt my workplace all week. But I didn't argue. Because despite all my reservations, despite all the logical reasons to say no, I wanted to go. I wanted to have dinner with the mysterious stranger who made my pulse race, and my carefully ordered world feel suddenly too small. I just wish I'd known then what I know now. That some strangers carry secrets that can change your life. That some coincidences aren't coincidences at all. That sometimes, when you spill coffee on the wrong person, you don't just ruin their shirt. You step into a world you never knew existed. A world of danger and desire and decisions that can't be undone. But on that Friday afternoon, surrounded by books and the comfortable routine of my ordinary life. I didn't know any of that yet. I didn't know that the man who'd just asked me to dinner wasn't just a businessman with expensive taste. I didn't know that every book he'd checked out, every appearance at the library, every seemingly casual encounter had been carefully planned. I didn't know that my grandmother, who died 6 months ago and left me nothing but her ancient recipe box and a modest savings account, had secrets of her own, debts that she'd taken to her grave, debts that had somehow become mine to pay. And I definitely didn't know that I'd already been marked, claimed, designated as payment for something I didn't understand. All I knew was that a gorgeous stranger had asked me to dinner, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt alive. I spent Saturday morning in a state of controlled panic. What did one wear to dinner with a mysterious Italian stranger who probably spent more on cologne than I spent on groceries? My closet, usually perfectly adequate, suddenly looked like a clearance rack at a discount store. Marissa arrived at noon with reinforcements: her own closet, a makeup kit, and a bottle of wine, for courage. "He's picking you up at 7?" she asked, rifling through my clothes with increasing dismay. "Okay, we have time, but Diana, honey, we need to discuss your wardrobe." "What's wrong with my wardrobe?" She held up a cardigan with elbow patches. "You dress like a librarian." "I am a librarian. You don't have to advertise it." She tossed the cardigan aside and pulled out a black dress I'd forgotten I owned. "This, with my leather jacket and those ankle boots you wore to Sarah's wedding. Hair down, not up. Minimal jewelry. This feels like a lot of effort for one dinner." Marissa stopped her closet excavation and fixed me with a serious look. "Diana, when was the last time you went on a date?" I thought about it. Does coffee with that guy from the book club count? The one who spent 2 hours explaining why Moby Dick is actually about his relationship with his father? No, that doesn't count. She sat on my bed. "You're always so careful, so measured. But this guy, there's something about him. I saw the way he looked at you, like you were the only person in that entire library." "That's what worries me," I admitted. "I don't know anything about him, not even his last name. So ask him tonight. Go to dinner, have a conversation like normal people. Maybe he's just a nice guy who likes books and happens to be unfairly attractive." I wanted to believe that, but something in my gut told me there was more to him than expensive clothes and mysterious smiles. The question was whether I was brave enough to find out what. At 6:45, I was dressed in the black dress, Marissa's leather jacket, and enough nervous energy to power the entire building. I'd done my makeup 3 times, trying to find the balance between "I made an effort" and "I spent all day obsessing over this." At 6:55, my phone buzzed. I'm downstairs. My stomach flipped. He hadn't even tried to come up, hadn't pressured me to let him into my apartment. Somehow, that small gesture of respect made me feel slightly better about this entire insane situation. Marissa peered out my window. "Diana, there's a black car down there that looks like it costs more than my condo, with a driver." "A driver?" "A driver. In a suit. What kind of businessman has a driver?" I grabbed my purse before I could overthink it. "The kind who knows he'll want to drink wine at dinner?" But even I didn't believe that. The car was indeed black, sleek, and utterly intimidating. The driver, a middle-aged man with a professional demeanor, opened the back door for me without a word. And there he was, sitting in the back seat like he belonged in a movie about sophisticated criminals. "Diana." He said my name like it was something precious. "You look beautiful. You clean up nice yourself." It was an understatement. He wore a dark suit, different from the one I'd ruined, with a dark blue shirt that made his eyes look even more intense. His hair was perfectly styled, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne as I slid into the seat beside him. The door closed, and suddenly, We were alone in the intimate space of the back seat, the city lights starting to glow as dusk fell over Seattle. I realized I never properly introduced myself, he said. Dante Romano. Romano? That's Italian? Very Italian. My family is from Sicily, originally. And now you're in Seattle? Now I'm in Seattle. He said it with finality, like the subject was closed. Tell me about yourself, Diana Carter. What makes a beautiful woman become a librarian? I bristled slightly at the phrasing. You say that like it's an unusual career choice. Not unusual, just you seem like someone who could do anything. Why books? Because books are honest, I said. They tell you exactly what they are. A mystery is a mystery. A romance is a romance. There are no hidden agendas, no games. You always know what you're getting. Something flickered across his face. There and gone too quickly to identify. And that's important to you? Honesty? Isn't it important to everyone? He was quiet for a moment. In theory. In practice, most people prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Well, I'm not most people. No, he agreed softly. You're definitely not. The restaurant was in a part of Pioneer Square I'd never explored, tucked away on a side street with no sign. Just a red door, the kind of place you'd never find unless you knew it was there. Inside, it was warm and dimly lit, with exposed brick walls and tables covered in white linens. A man in his 60s greeted Dante like an old friend, speaking rapid Italian and kissing both his cheeks before leading us to a private table in the back corner. You come here often? I asked as we sat down. Often enough. The owner, Marco, makes me remember home. Do you miss it, Sicily? Sometimes. But Seattle has its own appeal. A waiter appeared with wine, red, expensive looking, and poured without being asked. I noticed Dante didn't even glance at the menu. You're just ordering for both of us? I asked, half amused, half annoyed. You said you trusted books because they're honest. Trust me with dinner. If you don't like it, we'll order something else. It should have felt presumptuous. Instead, it felt oddly intimate, like he was asking me to let him take care of me in this small way. The food, when it came, was incredible. Fresh pasta that melted on the tongue, perfectly seasoned vegetables, bread that was somehow both crispy and soft. Dante had been right about the carbonara. It was the best I'd ever tasted. We talked as we ate. Surface things at first. Favorite books, places we'd traveled, memories of childhood. He was easy to talk to, listening with complete attention, asking questions that suggested genuine interest. But every time the conversation veered toward anything really personal, his work, his family, why he'd really been at the library every day, he deflected with the skill of someone who'd had a lot of practice keeping secrets. You're doing it again, I said finally, setting down my wine glass. Doing what? Avoiding. Every time I ask about your life, you change the subject. I could say the same about you. What do you want to know? He leaned back, studying me. Everything. But let's start with why you're really having dinner with a stranger who followed you around the library all week. You want honesty? Fine. Because you intrigue me. Because you're different from anyone I've ever met. Because I'm 28 years old and tired of playing it safe. I met his eyes. Your turn. Why did you really keep coming to the library? Because I needed to know you. Why? The question hung between us, heavy with implications I didn't fully understand. For a moment, I thought he might actually answer, might tell me whatever truth he was holding back. Instead, he reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough, and the touch sent electricity up my arm. Dance with me, he said. There's no music. As if on cue, music drifted from somewhere in the restaurant, a slow Italian song that sounded like heartbreak and passion rolled into one melody. Dante stood, still holding my hand, and led me to the small open space near our table. Then he pulled me close, one hand at my waist, the other still clasping mine, and we began to move. I'd never been a good dancer, had always felt awkward and self-conscious. But with Dante, it was effortless. He led with confidence, and my body followed like we'd done this 1,000 times before. "This isn't an answer," I whispered against his shoulder. "No," he agreed. "But it's true nonetheless." We swayed together, and I felt the solid warmth of his body against mine, smelled that expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. His hand moved slightly at my waist, his thumb tracing small circles that sent shivers through me. "Diana?" His voice was low, rough. "You should run from me." I pulled back enough to look at him. "What?" "You asked for honesty. Here it is. You should leave this restaurant. Go home. Forget you ever met me. I'm not a good man. I'm not the kind of man a woman like you should be anywhere near." My heart was pounding. "And yet you're holding me like you have no intention of letting me go." "I know." His jaw clenched. "Dio mi aiuti, I know." The Italian words, spoken with such anguish, made me brave. I reached up, touching his face, feeling the slight stubble along his jaw. "Then don't let go. Not tonight." His eyes darkened, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me right there in the middle of the restaurant. Instead, he released me, stepping back with visible effort. "I'll take you home," he said. The drive back to my apartment was silent, charged with everything unsaid. When we pulled up to my building, Dante walked me to the door like a gentleman, keeping a careful distance between us. "Thank you for dinner," I said, meaning it despite the confusion swirling in my chest. Even with all the mystery and deflection, I had a nice time. "Diana." He said my name like a prayer. "If I could be anyone else for you, I would be. Remember that." Then he kissed my hand. Just my hand, a gesture so old-fashioned and sweet it made my breath catch, and walked back to the waiting car. I stood on my doorstep long after the taillights had disappeared, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd warned me away while simultaneously making me want him more. He'd given me glimpses of something real beneath the expensive clothes and careful words, but kept the full truth locked away. I should have listened to his warning, should have recognized it for what it was. A man with a conscience trying to protect me from something I didn't understand. But I didn't listen, because for the first time in my careful, controlled life, I felt something real, something dangerous and intoxicating and utterly impossible to ignore. I went inside, pulled out my phone, and did what I should have done days ago. I Googled Dante Romano Seattle. What I found would change everything. The search results loaded slowly, or maybe it just felt that way because my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. At first, there was nothing unusual. A few social media profiles, a mention in a local business journal about real estate investments, a photo from some charity gala where he stood with other wealthy-looking men in tuxedos. Then I clicked on page 2 of the results, and everything shifted. There were no direct accusations, nothing explicit enough to be actionable. But there were implications. Articles about organized crime families on the West Coast, with Romano listed among names that appeared in federal investigations. A blog post by a true crime enthusiast connecting various legitimate businessmen to less legitimate activities. Court documents from a RICO case where his name appeared in footnotes, though never as a defendant. And photos. Dante at restaurants with men who looked like they ate threats for breakfast. Dante at a funeral for someone identified as a known associate of organized crime. Dante leaving federal court, his face expressionless, expensive lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. I set my phone down, hands shaking. This couldn't be real. The man who'd held me so carefully while we danced, who'd worn me away, even as his eyes begged me to stay. He couldn't be what these articles suggested. Could he? I spent the rest of the weekend in a fog of denial and research. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. Dante Romano wasn't just a businessman with some questionable associates. If even half of what I read was true, he was the head of the Romano family, one of the most powerful organized crime operations on the West Coast. Drugs, gambling, protection rackets, all carefully hidden behind legitimate businesses and charitable foundations. The man I'd spilled coffee on, the man who'd asked me to dinner, the man I'd been stupidly, dangerously attracted to, was a mob boss. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face the library, couldn't bear the thought of him walking through those doors again with his perfectly tailored suits and dangerous secrets. Marissa called 3 times before I finally answered. Diana, what happened? Did the date go that badly? Marissa, I need you to do something for me. If a man named Dante Romano comes into the library, tell him I'm not interested. Tell him to leave me alone. Wait, what? What happened after I left you on Saturday? I told her everything. The dinner, the dancing, the warning he'd given me. And then I told her what I'd found online. Holy shit, she breathed. Diana, you're joking. I wish I was. What are you going to do? Nothing. I'm going to do absolutely nothing. I went on 1 date with this man. 1. I'll avoid him. He'll get the message. And that will be the end of it. But even as I said it, I knew it was wishful thinking. Men like Dante Romano didn't take rejection well. And I'd seen something in his eyes Saturday night. Something that suggested I'd become more than just a passing interest to him. I was right to be worried. Tuesday evening, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of white roses. At least 3 dozen of them, arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than my rent. The card read, I meant what I said. You should run. But I find I'm hoping you won't. I gave the flowers to my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who asked no questions but gave me a long, knowing look that suggested she understood more than I wanted her to. Wednesday, another delivery. This time, a first edition of Jane Eyre, my favorite novel, with a note in elegant handwriting. For the woman who believes books are always honest. Some stories are worth the risk. I kept the book. I told myself it was because I couldn't give away something so valuable, but the truth was simpler and more dangerous. Part of me, the part that had felt so alive in his arms, wanted to believe there was more to Dante Romano than criminal activity and danger. Thursday, he was waiting outside the library when my shift ended. You're not answering my calls, he said as I tried to walk past him to my car. Because I don't want to talk to you. Diana, please, 5 minutes. I know who you are. I turned to face him, keeping distance between us. I know what you are, and I'm not interested in becoming collateral damage in your world. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or resignation. You researched me. Of course I researched you. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought... He stopped, running a hand through his hair in the first uncontrolled gesture I'd ever seen from him. I thought I had more time before you found out. Time for what? To get me more invested before revealing you're basically a crime boss? I'm not what those articles say I am. Really? So you're not the head of the Romano family? You don't control most of the organized crime on the West Coast? All those federal investigations just have your name in them by accident? He stepped closer, and I instinctively stepped back. He froze, and I saw hurt flash in his eyes. Those investigations have never led to charges because I haven't done anything illegal. Yes, I come from a family with a certain reputation. Yes, I have business interests that some people question. But I am not a monster, Diana. Everything I do within the bounds of the law. The bounds of the law that your expensive lawyers define very creatively? Is that so different from any other businessman in this city? The only difference is my last name and where my family came from. I wanted to believe him. God help me. Standing there in the library parking lot with the man who'd made me feel more in one evening than I'd felt in years, I wanted to believe every word. It doesn't matter, I said finally. Even if you're the legitimate businessman you claim to be, your world is dangerous. You said it yourself. I should run from you, so that's what I'm doing. Diana. No. Thank you for dinner. Thank you for the gifts. But I can't do this. I won't do this. I got in my car and drove away, watching him grow smaller in my rearview mirror. He didn't follow, didn't call. For 3 days, there was silence. I told myself it was relief I felt. I told myself I'd made the right choice, the safe choice. I threw myself into work, staying late at the library, reorganizing sections that didn't need reorganizing, helping patrons with a forced enthusiasm that fooled no one. You're miserable, Marissa observed Friday afternoon. And don't tell me you're not. You've been alphabetizing the mystery section for 2 hours. It was already alphabetized. I'm fine. You're in love with a mobster and trying to pretend you're not. I am not in love with him. I barely know him. Diana, I saw your face when you talked about that date. I saw the way you looked when you told me who he really is. You're not afraid of him. You're afraid of how he makes you feel. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was afraid of the way one evening with Dante Romano had shaken the careful foundations of my carefully constructed life. But that didn't change the reality of who he was and what being with him would mean. That night, I finally let myself grieve what could never be. I poured a glass of wine, put on sad music, and let myself cry for the man I couldn't have and the life I'd glimpsed but could never lead. I was halfway through my second glass when someone knocked on my door. I assumed it was Mrs. Chen, maybe returning a book she'd borrowed. I opened the door in my pajamas, face probably still red from crying, completely unprepared for what I found. Dante stood there, but this was a different Dante. His suit was disheveled, his hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, his eyes wild with something I couldn't name. Don't, he said before I could speak. Don't tell me to leave. Not yet. Just listen. Dante, your grandmother, Catherine Carter, she died 6 months ago. The change of subject threw me. How do you know my grandmother's name? Because 18 years ago she borrowed money from my father. A significant amount of money. She was trying to save your mother, trying to pay for experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. My mother, who'd died of cancer when I was 10, who'd fought for 2 years before the disease finally won. I don't understand. My father gave her the money. He told her to pay it back when she could. No interest, no strings. He liked her, said she reminded him of his own mother. But she never paid it back. The debt sat on the books, forgotten by everyone except the accountants who tracked such things. I felt cold. How much? With compound interest over 18 years? $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered back, grabbing the doorframe for support. That's impossible. My grandmother had nothing. She lived in a tiny apartment, worked as a seamstress until she was 70. There's no way she owed that much money. She didn't know. My father never told her about the interest because he never expected her to pay. He considered it a gift, a kindness to someone who reminded him of home. But when he died 3 years ago, the debt became part of the family ledgers. And when your grandmother died 6 months ago, it transferred to her next of kin. To me. The words came out as a whisper. To you. I looked at him, really looked at him, and finally understood. That's why you were at the library. That's why you kept coming back. This was never about attraction or coincidence or fate. I was marked as payment for a debt. The anguish on his face was real. At first, yes, I came to see you because of the debt, to assess what could be done about it. But then I met you. You spilled coffee on me and called me arrogant, and you were so fiery and real and different from anyone I'd ever known. And I realized I wanted to know you. Not because of the debt, but because of who you are. How convenient that what you wanted aligned perfectly with what you needed. I heard the bitterness in my own voice. Tell me, Dante, what exactly does payment mean in your world? What was I supposed to be payment for? Money? Services? Myself? He flinched like I'd struck him. Never that. Never. Diana, I know how this looks, but you have to believe me. Believe you? You've lied to me from the moment we met. Every conversation, every moment we spent together was built on a lie. Not all of it. He stepped closer, and this time I didn't back away. The way I feel about you, that's real. The way you make me laugh, make me want to be better than what I am, that's real. Yes, I approached you because of the debt. But I'm standing here now because I'm falling in love with you, and I will do whatever it takes to protect you from the consequences of what your grandmother borrowed. Protect me? Dante, you're the danger. You and your family and your world of debts and violence and... I stopped because I heard it. A sound from the stairwell, subtle but wrong. Dante heard it too. His entire body changed, became something predatory and dangerous. The businessman mask dropping away to reveal something far more lethal underneath. Get inside, he said quietly. Now. What? Diana, please. Trust me one more time. Get inside, lock the door, and don't open it for anyone but me. The fear in his voice, the urgency, overrode my anger. I stepped back and he moved with me, positioning himself between me and the door. Lock it, he said again, and call 911 if you hear anything unusual. Then he was gone, moving down the hallway with the silent grace of a hunter, and I was alone in my apartment with my heart racing, and the sudden, terrible understanding that everything had just become very, very real. I locked the door. I grabbed my phone. And I waited, listening to the silence of my apartment building, wondering what I'd just stumbled into, and whether the man I couldn't stop thinking about was about to get himself killed protecting me from a debt I'd never asked for, and a danger I'd never seen coming. The silence lasted exactly 90 seconds. Then I heard voices in the hallway, low, tense, speaking in rapid Italian. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Threat and counter-threat, challenge and response. Then nothing. Just silence again, stretching out until my nerves were screaming. I had my phone in my hand, 911 already dialed, finger hovering over the call button. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was stupidity. Maybe it was the fact that despite everything, I trusted Dante Romano not to let anything happen to me. When the knock finally came, I jumped so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Diana, it's me. Open the door. Dante's voice, controlled but strained. I unlocked the door and found him standing there, looking rumpled but unharmed. Behind him, the hallway was empty. What happened? I asked, pulling him inside and locking the door again. Rival family. They've been watching the building, waiting for an opportunity to get to you. Get to me? Why would anyone want to get to me? He moved past me into the apartment, checking the windows, the fire escape, everything. Satisfied, he finally turned to face me, because word got out about the debt. More specifically, Word got out that I've been personally involved in collecting it. In my world, that suggests you're important to me, which makes you a target. A target for what? Leverage? Revenge? It depends on who's asking. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then pocketed it again. I have people coming. They'll watch the building tonight. Make sure no one else tries anything. People? You mean like bodyguards? Dante? This is insane. I can't live like this. You won't have to. I'll handle it. How exactly do you plan to handle people who apparently want to kidnap or kill me because your world decided I'm payment for my grandmother's debt? He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was different, harder, more like the man the articles had described. The debt is forgiven. As of now, you owe my family nothing. I'll make sure everyone knows. And I'll make it very clear that anyone who comes near you answers to me personally. Just like that? You can just forgive $200,000? It's my decision to make. The money means nothing to me, Diana. Your safety means everything. I wanted to be angry. Wanted to rage at him for the lies, for the danger, for turning my quiet life into something out of a thriller novel. But standing there in my small apartment, watching him check the locks again with the careful attention of someone who understood real threats, I felt something else entirely. Why? I asked. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw everything he'd been holding back written plainly on his face. Because in a life filled with liars and users and people who only want something from me, you spilled coffee on my suit and didn't know or care who I was. You called me arrogant. You made me laugh. You made me feel human instead of just a name, a reputation, a position in a hierarchy I was born into. He crossed the space between us, stopping close enough that I could feel the heat of him. Because when I hold you, when I hear you laugh, when you look at me like I'm just a man instead of everything I represent, in those moments, I remember who I wanted to be before the world told me who I had to be. Dante. My voice came out as barely a whisper. I love you, Diana Carter. I love your fire and your honesty and the way you stand your ground even when you're terrified. I love that you work in a library because books are honest. And I love that you're brave enough to tell me I'm dangerous, even though you can see I'd cut off my own hand before I'd let anything hurt you. His hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything I'd learned about him. So yes, I'm forgiving the debt. I'm posting guards on your building. I'm going to war with anyone who looks at you wrong. Not because you're an obligation or a means to an end, but because losing you would destroy me. I should have been scared. Should have pushed him away, called the police, run like he'd told me to from the beginning. But I'd spent my whole life being careful, being safe, following the rules. And where had it gotten me? Alone in a too-quiet apartment, surrounded by books that told other people's stories while I lived no story of my own. I must be crazy, I whispered, because I believe you, and I think I'm falling in love with you too. The kiss was inevitable. He pulled me close, and I rose on my toes to meet him halfway. And when our lips finally touched, it was like coming home. He kissed me like I was precious, like I was fragile and fierce all at once, like he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment, and now that it was here, he wanted to memorize every second. I kissed him back with all the fear and frustration and feeling I'd been suppressing for days, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He made a sound low in his throat, deepening the kiss, his arms tightening around me until there was no space left between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I should go. My people will be here soon, and we need to talk about security measures. Or you could stay. The words were out before I could think better of them. Your people can handle security. You could stay here with me. Diana, if I stay, I know what staying means. I'm not a child, Dante. I'm a woman who's choosing, with open eyes, to let you stay. He pulled back enough to search my face, looking for doubt or uncertainty. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he kissed me again, slower this time, sweeter, a promise of what the night could hold. Are you sure? He asked against my lips. The only thing I'm sure of is that I've never felt this alive in my entire life. Stay. Please. So he stayed. The night that followed was a revelation. He was gentle when I needed gentleness, fierce when I needed fire, and always focused on me with an intensity that made me feel like the only woman in the world. We talked between kisses, sharing secrets and fears and hopes. He told me about growing up in a family where every decision was weighed against tradition and power, where love was often seen as weakness. I told him about losing my mother, about my grandmother raising me, about choosing a quiet life in a library because it felt safe after so much loss. I don't want safe anymore, I admitted, as we lay tangled together in the early morning hours. I want this. I want you. Even knowing what it means, what your world is like. I'll do everything I can to keep you separate from that world, he promised. You won't have to be involved in the family business. You can keep working at the library, keep your life. Can I? Really? You just told me people are using me as leverage. How can anything be normal after this? He was quiet for a moment, his hand tracing idle patterns on my shoulder. It won't be easy. There will be security measures, people watching to make sure you're safe. But I swear to you, Diana, I will find a way to give you the life you deserve, even if it means changing everything about mine. I turned in his arms to face him. What if I don't want you to change everything? What if I want to be part of your world, not separate from it? You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. Explain it to me. Let me make an informed choice instead of protecting me like I'm fragile. So he told me about the legitimate businesses that made up most of his operations now: real estate, restaurants, import-export. About the parts that weren't quite legal, the gray areas his lawyers helped him navigate. About the violence he'd witnessed, the decisions he'd had to make. The burden of being responsible for hundreds of people whose livelihoods depended on the Romano name. My father built an empire, he said. But it was an empire founded on fear and control. When I took over, I started changing things, moving money into legal operations, cutting ties with the worst elements. It's a slow process, and there are people in the organization who resist. But I'm trying to build something different. Something I can be proud of. Then let me help you, I said. I don't know anything about organized crime or business empires, but I know people. I know how to research, how to organize information, how to see patterns. Maybe I can help in ways you haven't considered. He smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his whole face. You want to be my partner? In business and in life? If you'll have me. Diana Carter, I've wanted you since you spilled coffee on me and looked at me like I was just another annoying man in an expensive suit. If you're willing to take a chance on me, on us, then yes. 1,000 times yes. We sealed the promise with a kiss, and as dawn broke over Seattle, painting my small apartment in shades of gold and pink, I felt the last of my reservations fall away. This wasn't the safe life I'd planned. It wasn't the careful path I'd been following, but it was real and raw and utterly, terrifyingly perfect. Outside, the city was waking up. Somewhere out there, people who wanted to use me against Dante were planning their next move. Somewhere, the consequences of my grandmother's debt and my own choices were taking shape. But in that moment, Wrapped in the arms of a man who'd turned my world upside down, I felt nothing but hope. Because for the first time in my life, I was living a story worth telling. And unlike the books I loved so much, I had no idea how this one would end. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was going to find out with Dante Romano by my side. The next few weeks were a crash course in what it meant to love someone from Dante's world. True to his word, he'd assigned security to watch my building. Not obviously, but I'd learned to spot them. The man reading a newspaper in the coffee shop across the street every morning. The woman who seemed to always be walking her dog when I left for work. At first, it felt invasive, like I'd lost my privacy. But as Dante explained the very real threats his enemies posed, I began to see the guards not as surveillance, but as protection. The library became a strange middle ground between my old life and my new one. I still helped patrons find books, still organized displays and led book clubs. But now Marissa knew the truth, and she watched me with a mixture of concern and fascination. "You're different," she observed one afternoon while we were processing new acquisitions. "Happier, but also more. I don't know. Alert? Like you're constantly aware of everything around you." "That's because I am." Dante's teaching me situational awareness. How to spot threats. What to do if something feels wrong. She set down the book she was holding. "Diana, are you sure about this? I mean, I'm happy you found someone, but this seems like a lot to take on." I'd asked myself the same question 100 times. Every time I noticed one of my guards. Every time Dante had to cancel plans because of business. Every time I caught him on the phone speaking in Italian with that particular edge to his voice that meant something had gone wrong, I questioned whether this was sustainable. But then I'd remember the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, like I was something miraculous. The way he listened when I talked about my day, genuinely interested in the small dramas of library life. The way he held me at night, like letting go would mean losing something irreplaceable. "I'm sure," I told Marissa. "It's not easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Dante was methodical about integrating me into his world. He started small, dinners with his business associates, the ones who ran the legitimate operations. A real estate developer named Marcus, who made me laugh with stories about difficult clients. A restaurant owner named Gia, who immediately adopted me as a surrogate daughter and kept trying to feed me. "They're testing me," I said to Dante after one such dinner. "Seeing if I fit, if I can handle being part of your life." "Is that a problem?" We were in his penthouse apartment, a sleek modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. I'd started keeping clothes there, a toothbrush in the bathroom, books on the nightstand, small claims that added up to something significant. "No, it's not a problem. I just wish I knew if I was passing their tests." He pulled me onto his lap on the leather couch, his arms wrapping around me. "You're not being tested, Amore. They're getting to know you. And they like you, I can tell. Marcus asked if you had any single friends for his brother, and Gia wants you to come to her restaurant for cooking lessons." "What about the other side?" I asked carefully. "The people who aren't in the legitimate businesses? When do I meet them?" His body tensed slightly. "That's different. Those relationships are complicated. Some of the old guard don't approve of the changes I'm making. Bringing you into that environment before I've secured their loyalty could be dangerous. For you or for me. Both." I'd learned that Dante's father had ruled through fear and absolute authority. His word was law, and no one questioned him. But Dante was different. He wanted consensus, cooperation. He was trying to transform a criminal empire into something resembling a legitimate business, and that meant navigating decades of tradition and loyalty to the old ways. "There's a meeting next week," he said carefully. "The full family council. They want to meet you officially." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because I'm going to marry you, and they need to approve." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "You're going to what?" He turned me in his arms so we were face to face, his expression serious. "Marry you." If you'll have me. I know it's fast. I know you probably wanted romance and a proper proposal. But in my world, marriage means protection. Once you're my wife, no one can touch you without starting a war. It's the best way I know to keep you safe. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. But I was smiling, tears pricking my eyes. You're supposed to tell me you can't live without me, that I'm your everything, that you want to spend the rest of your life making me happy. His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. Diana Carter, you are my everything. You walked into my life and turned it upside down in the best possible way. I was existing before you, going through the motions. But I wasn't living. You make me want to be better, do better, create something worthy of the faith you've shown in me. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. And yes, marrying you will keep you safe. But that's not why I want to do it. I want to marry you because the thought of spending my life with anyone else is unbearable. Because when I imagine my future, you're in every part of it. Because you're my heart, amore, and I want the whole world to know it. Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because of safety or politics or family approval, but because I love you. Because you've shown me a life I never knew I wanted, and I can't imagine going back to who I was before I met you. He kissed me then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, and there was something raw and possessive in his eyes that sent shivers through me. The council meeting, I said, trying to ground myself in practicality. What should I expect? Formality, tradition. A lot of old men who think women should be seen and not heard. His jaw tightened. They'll test you, try to find weaknesses. But I'll be there, and they know that disrespecting you means disrespecting me. Just be yourself, Diana. That's all I'm asking. The night of the meeting, I dressed carefully in a navy dress that Gia had helped me choose. Elegant but not flashy, respectful but not submissive. Dante wore a dark suit, and there was something different about him tonight. Harder. This was Dante Romano, the family head, not Dante the man who made me laugh over breakfast. The meeting was held in a private room at one of the family's restaurants, the kind of place that didn't appear on any tourist guides. When we arrived, 8 men were already seated around a large table. They ranged in age from their 40s to their 80s, all dressed expensively, all watching me with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Dante made introductions, and I shook hands with each man, meeting their eyes, refusing to be intimidated. There was Carlo, his father's former second-in-command, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes. Vincent, who ran the construction operations. Tony, who handled the ports. Others whose names and roles blurred together in my nervousness. So, this is the librarian, Carlo said, when we were all seated. He spoke with a heavy Italian accent, his tone making it clear he didn't think much of librarians, the one who has captured our Dante's heart. Diana is more than a librarian, Dante said, his voice carrying a warning. She's brilliant, brave, and going to be my wife. Show her the respect she deserves. Of course, of course. Carlo's smile didn't reach his eyes. Tell me, Diana, what do you know of our family? I know that you built something powerful, I said carefully, that you've survived when other organizations have fallen, that you value loyalty and tradition. Diplomatic answer. But we're not politicians here. What do you really think? I glanced at Dante, who gave me a slight nod. Permission to be honest. I think you're at a crossroads, I said. The world is changing. Law enforcement is more sophisticated. Financial tracking makes traditional operations harder to hide. Dante is trying to move the family into legitimate businesses, but some of you resist because it feels like abandoning what you built. What I think is that you have a choice: evolve or eventually be destroyed. The silence that followed was deafening. Carlo's eyes narrowed, and I thought I might have gone too far. Then, incredibly, he laughed. She has fire, this one. I like her. He looked at Dante. Your father would have shot someone for speaking so bluntly. My father isn't here, Dante said. And Diana is right. We need to change, or we won't survive another generation. What followed was hours of discussion. Not all of it was about me. Most of it wasn't. They talked about territories, about rival families, about investments and risks and opportunities. I listened, learning the language of this world, understanding how decisions were made and power was wielded. And I realized something. They were scared. These powerful men who controlled so much were terrified of becoming obsolete, of losing the only life they'd ever known. Dante wasn't just fighting tradition, he was fighting fear. When the meeting finally ended, Carlo approached me while Dante was speaking with Vincent. You love him, the old man said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And you understand what loving him means? The danger, the restrictions, the constant vigilance? I'm learning. He studied me for a long moment. My wife, God rest her soul, she hated this life. Hated what I did, what I was. She stayed because she had no choice, because that's what women did in her time. But she never truly accepted it. Dante's father, he chose a woman who understood the life, who embraced it, and it destroyed them both. They brought out the worst in each other. I'm not trying to be either of those things, I said. I'm just trying to love Dante while helping him build something better. Carlo nodded slowly. Then you might be exactly what this family needs. But be careful, Diana Carter. There are those who see change as betrayal, and they won't hesitate to use you to hurt him. It was a warning and an offer of protection all at once. I was being accepted, but with the understanding that acceptance came with its own dangers. The ride home was quiet. Dante held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. You did well tonight, he said finally. Better than well. You impressed them. Carlo warned me about people who might use me to hurt you. Carlo is wise, but he's also on our side now. I could see it in how he looked at you. You've won over one of the most influential members of the council. That's no small feat. I leaned my head on his shoulder. This is really happening, isn't it? I'm really going to marry you and become part of this world. Having second thoughts? No, just processing. 6 weeks ago, my biggest concern was whether to rearrange the mystery section. Now I'm engaged to a man who has council meetings with former mob bosses. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. When you put it that way, it does sound surreal. Surreal, but right. This is right, Dante. Us, together. I feel it. So do I, Amore. So do I. But even as we drove through the nighttime streets of Seattle, I couldn't shake Carlo's warning. Someone, somewhere, saw me as a threat or an opportunity. And in Dante's world, both could be equally dangerous. The engagement was announced through the proper channels, which in Dante's world meant carefully worded messages sent to every family and organization that mattered. Within 24 hours, gifts started arriving at both the penthouse and my apartment. Expensive wines, elaborate flower arrangements, jewelry that made my breath catch. Each gift came with a card offering congratulations, and reading between the lines, a promise of continued alliance or a subtle threat. This one is from the Marchetti family in San Francisco, Dante said, examining a particularly ornate silver serving set. They're testing boundaries, seeing if they can curry favor now that you'll be my wife. And this? I held up a card attached to a stunning pearl necklace. His expression darkened. The Volkov brothers. That's a problem. Why? Because they're the rivals who tried to get to you before. Sending a gift now is their way of saying they acknowledge the engagement but haven't given up on finding leverage against me. I set the necklace down carefully. What do we do about it? We send a message back. A polite thank you that makes it clear any move against you will be met with overwhelming force. He pulled me close. But first, we get married. The ceremony needs to happen soon, within 2 weeks if possible. 2 weeks? Dante, that's impossible. Planning a wedding takes months. Not in my world. I have people who can arrange everything. We'll keep it small. Immediate family, close associates. The important thing is making it official, making you untouchable. Part of me wanted to argue for a longer engagement, a proper wedding with all the trimmings I'd dreamed about as a girl. But I understood the urgency. Every day I remained his fiancée instead of his wife. I was vulnerable. Okay, I agreed. 2 weeks, but I have conditions. Name them. My friend Marissa is my maid of honor. We get married somewhere that means something to us, not just a strategic location. And I write my own vows. He smiled, that devastating smile that still made my heart skip. Done. Though I should warn you, my vows will be in Italian. It's tradition. Then you'll have to translate for me afterward. I'll do better than that. I'll show you what every word means. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Gia took charge of the catering, insisting on preparing everything herself. Marcus helped secure a venue, a historic mansion in Capitol Hill with a garden that overlooked the water. Dante's people handled security, vetting every vendor, every guest, every detail with a thoroughness that would have seemed paranoid if I didn't understand the very real threats we faced. Marissa threw herself into her maid of honor duties with enthusiasm, helping me find a dress, a simple but elegant ivory gown that made me feel like a bride rather than someone playing dress-up. We kept my guest list small. Marissa, a few colleagues from the library, Mrs. Chen from my building who'd become an unexpected friend. This is really happening, Marissa said the night before the wedding as we sat in my apartment, soon to be my former apartment, drinking wine and trying on my something borrowed, something blue. You're marrying into the mob. I'm marrying Dante, I corrected. The rest is just context. Context that includes armed guards at your wedding and a prenuptial agreement that's basically a peace treaty between criminal organizations. She wasn't wrong. The prenup had been necessary but strange, less about protecting assets and more about establishing that I was under Dante's protection, that any harm to me would be considered an act of war. His lawyers had explained it all very carefully, making sure I understood what I was signing. Are you scared? Marissa asked. Terrified, I admitted, but also excited, also sure this is what I want. Is it possible to feel all those things at once? If it wasn't, I don't think anyone would ever get married. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Seattle actually cooperating with perfect weather. I got ready in one of the mansion's upstairs rooms, Marissa and Gia fussing over me like mother hens. When I finally looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because of the dress or the makeup, but because of the expression in my own eyes. I looked happy, brave, ready for whatever came next. Bellissima, Gia breathed, tears streaming down her face. Dante will forget how to speak when he sees you. The ceremony itself was small but perfect. The garden had been transformed with white flowers and subtle lighting. Guests filled perhaps 30 seats. Dante's inner circle, the most important members of the council, my small group of friends who'd been thoroughly vetted and approved. When the music started and I walked down the makeshift aisle on Marcus's arm, he'd volunteered to give me away since my father was long gone, I saw only Dante. He stood at the altar in a black suit that was somehow both traditional and modern, his hair perfect, his expression unguarded in a way I'd never seen in public. He looked at me like I was walking toward him on a cloud of light, like I was something miraculous and precious and utterly his. The ceremony was a blend of traditions. A priest Dante trusted spoke the traditional vows in both English and Italian. When it came time for our personal vows, I went first. Dante, you walked into my life when I didn't know I was looking for anything. You challenged me, protected me, and showed me that love doesn't have to be safe to be real. I can't promise that I'll always understand your world or that I won't question your decisions. But I can promise that I'll stand beside you, that I'll be your partner in building something better, and that I'll love you with everything I am for as long as I live. His eyes shone with emotion as I finished. Then he spoke, his voice steady and sure, the Italian words flowing like music. I didn't understand most of it, but I felt the weight of every word, saw the commitment in his eyes. When the priest pronounced us married, Dante pulled me close and kissed me with a possessiveness that made several people laugh, and Carlo call out something in Italian that sounded vaguely inappropriate. But I didn't care. I was married. I was Dante's wife. I was Diana Romano now, and somehow that felt exactly right. The reception was held inside the mansion, an elegant affair with too much food and too much wine, and people who looked at me with new respect now that I bore Dante's name. Carlo raised a glass and a toast, speaking first in Italian and then translating to English. To Dante and Diana, may their love be strong enough to weather any storm, and may they build something worthy of the Romano name. There were more toasts, more speeches, more well wishes that ranged from genuine to strategic. But the moment that mattered most came late in the evening, when Dante and I finally found a quiet corner away from the celebration. "Husband," I said, testing out the word. "Wife," he replied, pulling me against him. "How does it feel?" "Surreal, perfect, terrifying. All of that." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Do you want to know what I said in my vows?" "Tell me." "I said that you are my light in darkness, that you walked into my world of shadows and brought sunshine. I promised to protect you, to honor you, to build a life worthy of your courage in choosing me. I said that you've given me hope that the Romano name can stand for something better than fear and violence. And I swore, before God and my family, that I will spend every day of my life proving that your faith in me was not misplaced." Tears blurred my vision. "That's beautiful. It's true. Every word." He kissed my forehead. "Are you ready to leave? We have a plane waiting." "A plane? Where are we going?" "Amalfi Coast. I own a house there, private and protected. We'll have 2 weeks with no business, no politics, no council meetings, just us." It sounded like paradise. But as we said our goodbyes and headed to the car that would take us to the airport, I saw Carlo watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. He raised his glass slightly when our eyes met, a gesture that could have been blessing or warning. The flight to Italy was long but comfortable. Dante's private plane had a bedroom, and we took full advantage of it. But even in his arms, high above the Atlantic, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Some challenge we'd have to face. "You're thinking too hard," Dante murmured against my hair. "I can feel it. Just wondering what happens when we get back. If anything will have changed." "Everything has changed. You're my wife now. That means something in my world, Diana. It means you're protected by every alliance I've built, every loyalty I've earned. No one will dare touch you. And what about the people who want to hurt you? The ones who see change as betrayal?" He was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll face them together. But not now. Now we're going to Italy, and I'm going to make love to my wife on every surface of that house, and we're going to pretend for 2 weeks that the world outside doesn't exist." The house in Amalfi was spectacular, all white stone and blue tiles, perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. We spent our days exploring the coastline, eating too much pasta, making love with the windows open so we could hear the waves. Dante showed me the town where his father was born, introduced me to distant relatives who embraced me as family. For those 2 perfect weeks, we were just a couple on their honeymoon, no different from the other tourists taking selfies at scenic viewpoints. But on our last night, as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Dante's phone rang. He'd left it off for the entire trip, but something made him check it now. His expression as he read the messages was everything I'd feared. "What is it?" I asked, my heart sinking. The Volkov brothers made a move. While we were gone, they hit one of our legitimate businesses, a restaurant Marcus manages. No one was seriously hurt, but the message is clear. They're not accepting the new order. What does that mean for us? He set the phone down and took my hands. It means the honeymoon is over. We go back to Seattle, and I handle this the way it needs to be handled, permanently. Dante. Not violence, he said quickly, reading my expression. I promised you I was building something better, and I meant it. But there are other ways to neutralize a threat. Ways that will send a message to anyone else thinking about challenging our position. I thought about the life we'd just lived for 2 weeks. Simple, peaceful, normal. Then I thought about the life waiting for us back home. Complicated, dangerous, anything but normal. But I'd made my choice when I said my vows. Then we go back, I said firmly. And we show them what happens when they underestimate a librarian who married a mob boss. He laughed, surprised and delighted. You're incredible, you know that? I'm terrified, but I'm also your wife and your partner. We handle this together. The next morning, we flew back to Seattle. As the plane descended through the clouds and the city came into view, I watched Dante transform from my gentle, passionate husband back into Dante Romano, head of the family. His expression hardened. His posture straightened. He became someone capable of making the difficult decisions his position required. But when he took my hand as we walked off the plane, I felt the slight tremor in his grip. He was scared too. Scared of what was coming. Scared of failing. Scared of letting this threat touch me. We've got this, I whispered as we climbed into the waiting car, guards falling into formation around us. We've got this, he agreed. And as we drove through familiar streets toward our new life together, I realized that this was what love looked like in Dante's world. Not candlelit dinners and poetry, though we'd have those too, but standing together against threats, building something better out of something broken, choosing each other every day despite the danger. I was Diana Romano now, wife of a man who straddled the line between criminal and legitimate, partner in an effort to transform an empire built on fear into something that could survive in the light. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I was that lonely librarian spilling coffee on strangers. It was so much better.